live.
We are
And
live.
I know when we booked this like topic, there was going to be like lack of show up because our clients already do it. So we're going to have this lack of show up in the topic.
Oh, you mean here in our
In our
private room
Zoom,
for our
yeah. And
customers?
so, but the
Yeah, yeah,
live stream community has not heard this yet. And we do have a lot of do-it-yourselfers on our platform. And so I thought it was really good for us to like step in and say, hey, if you haven't done this, this is time to do it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the scheduling part of podcasting, because if you get this simplified, everything else works. Your production's easier, your guest invitations are easier, like everything's easier. And we have it down to a science.
we do. I was just speaking with some new Podtize customers that are starting to go through the process of launching a show, and this is one of the things we talk about. Anybody who's in that stage, especially with your first podcast, this is critical for you. And I'm sure this episode, we'll use this as a resource for all new podcasters going forward.
So if you didn't guess, here on Feed Your Brand today, we are talking podcast scheduling simplified, right? The art of customized booking calendars. I love that title because, I mean, I think it is both like there's psychology involved in it. There's a little bit of finesse to your brand and styling that you bring to it. So you've got to bring a little bit of yourself to it. And there's a lot of technical stuff, right? There's a lot of organizational skills. So it really taps, I mean, it like, I'm going to say energizes every part of my brain. But for some of you, you're just sitting there going, oh no. And I know that's you, Tom.
Well, no, I don't think that's exactly me. It's not, oh no, because here's the thing. Well,
Oh no,
yes,
because somebody else is going to take care of this for you.
hold on now, Tracy. Wait a second. So here's the thing. I definitely, my brain is more in the creative visionary side, okay, and less in the logistics and process and systems side. I will admit that. However, I do appreciate really good processes and systems. And while it is maybe a challenge for people that think the way I do to do this themselves, it's a one-time pain that you need to get through because, as you said, once this is set up, oh my goodness, is it a wonderful thing, and it makes a podcaster's life so much easier.
Absolutely. So we really look at this as a kind of an 8-step process. And that's where I think people like go, oh gosh, like when we send out our PDF, which will be available in the blog post for this episode and is of course available to anyone who's here on Zoom with us and live listening to this. But we have this 8-step process that we go through. Now, not all of it is complicated. A lot of it is just simply copy and paste. But we have this set up because we want to have a thorough follow through process from beginning to end. We want you to be, as a host, the most professional person that any guest has ever spoken to before. Now, if you don't have guests on your show, this doesn't apply to you because it just doesn't work like that. You're not booking anyone into any calendar. But if you've got guests on your show, even one time a month or more, you need to have this process be professional. It is the number one thing I hear from guests who say, oh, I didn't go on that show. Was it a good show? Because their booking calendar was like all over the place. And I didn't think I was even booking a real appointment with someone, or it looked like a sales call instead of a podcast interview. So I bailed out. I don't want to be in somebody's funnel. So a lot of you are following into, I'm just going to use my regular old calendar. And it doesn't always work. It makes your guests, especially the premium guests you're looking to have, a little worry about working with you and coming on your show.
You know, there is such a wide variety of booking systems and processes that exist, all the way from the ultra simple, which really isn't a system, really. It's just like you said, Tracy, just people saying, here, book on my normal calendar, to, oh my gosh, incredibly detailed. And some people mail special gift packs and things to their guests as a thank you and stuff. I mean, so there's a wide spectrum of ultra simple to ultra complex, but it is your first opportunity to help treat your guest in a certain way that, if you think about it and put a little effort into planning, wow, does it do you credit and makes your life easier, right?
Right. And that's really what we want to stress here is this is getting this down and getting this all set. It's set and review once a year. That's my recommendation. Like I set a review once a year on it. I don't do more. I just scan it to make sure I still have the right links. I'm still saying the right thing. My show hasn't shifted. Like you just want to make sure those things are good, but you really can mostly set and forget it. But when you've set this up, you are setting the tone for everything you're going to do, and you're making your life easier all along the way. And you're showing your guests that you are all into this podcasting thing. You are going to promote them. You're going to be professional when you show up on that call with them. So if you in any way are using a guesting strategy to get more on your show, get more listeners by having your guests promote you. If you're using your guest to get more referrals to new clients, if you're using your guest as your potential new clients, any one of those things means that you really need to excel at this part of podcasting. And so that's why we set this up because, why should you reinvent the wheel when we've done it hundreds and hundreds of times again and again? And we've left room for that art that you want to create in there, that tone that you want to add, those special ahas and wows, like the box that Tom was talking about sending a gift to someone, right? So you can add these things in there, like adding, capturing their address or their phone number or whatever it is that you want that we may not have already selected on here. There's room for all of those things. So if you really want to add your own personal touch to this, you can. So let's talk a little bit about, Tom, what these things are. So we want to make sure that we have a invitation, but we also have to, prior to that, make sure that we've got a couple of legal things in order. So we have you all work on your release language, right? Because you're going to have them on your show. You've got to have your photo, image, video, audio release that allows you to use it. Because if they're not going to agree to that, then you can't use the interview. So we got to have that done first. So that's the first thing we address in our sort of setup of how we do it is we just double check this release template, make sure we're doing it. If you are doing, and I'm just going to say this, if you are doing a complex show, you have HIPAA regulations, you have FinTech regulations, you have FINRA regulations, you have any of those things that are complex, you may want this to be a separated form. This is why I put this up front. You may need a more significant release that they have to click through and sign. And it can't just happen in the calendar with a little checkbox and a little acceptance. If you are in a regulated industry, pay attention here. Get a lawyer to help you with this release. Make sure you're covering your bases. I have seen it before. It can be an issue.
It can be. I do want to say for the vast majority of podcasters out there, and remember, I am not a lawyer, so I am not offering legal advice. However, for the vast majority of podcasts, a simple checkbox saying, hey, guest, you agree to being recorded and published as a podcast, and you might want to add and as a video on YouTube if you're doing that, like a lot of podcasters are today. That simple checkbox is enough that they have to take action to check to say, yep, I know I'm being recorded. It's okay. And that will cover what you want to do for most of you.
Right. So in our particular case on here, we're giving you our language. So we're giving you basic language. We tell you that you need to consult an attorney, but we give you some language about how you might do it in a calendar program. And for most of the calendar programs, I'm just going to say it looks a little kind of funny because you've got 4 check boxes that you need to use. The reason for that is a lot of the calendar programs have a character limit on anything you can add into the calendar form, especially Calendly or any of those free ones that you might be using. They have restrictions on the length of what you can put in there. So we pulled it out. But if you happen to have one of these fantastic mail programs that make it so easy and you could put a whole paragraph in it, you feel free to lump it into one. So that's one of the things. We also do have it if you want to put it on your website, or you can put it into Zoom. Zoom has a disclaimer section. So we have that language for you to customize and copy and paste. And so when we show it to you in our form, we give it with this yellow highlight that says, fill your name in here. Please don't copy and paste the whole thing and forget to customize it. I've seen it happen before, right? Which is why I don't put our name in it anymore. because I've seen that happen accidentally, Tom.
I have seen that happen too. Look, we're happy to provide you support and make recommendations. And please go to school on us and use this copy. Just make sure you make it a little bit yours.
That's right. You
Right?
just make it say your name on it. Say your show name, not mine. You don't want mine and you don't want generic blank, right? So make sure you do those things on that. But the reason we start with this release form, it seems really technical, is because you may need to get an advisor in there. So you want to get it out of the way before you start going in and setting up your calendar. So that's step 2. So step 1 is set up a calendar program. Make sure you got it ready to go, right? And step 2 is to make that release happen. So we go through that really in this document that we're going to give you, but making sure that you've set up your calendar program, you've sort of picked where you're going to go, setting that up and really making sure everything you have in place is there. You're going to put a description in, you're going to put a location in. You can use the dynamic Zoom. If you've got that all integrated, you can just keep a room. I actually have a forwarding URL that I use and I recommend for this is so I have like thebingefactor.com/ Zoom, or you can have thebingefactor.com/ interview, or you can have, whatever you want, you can have that and make sure that you've got this forwarding to the exact Zoom link you want to use, as long as you use a consistent Zoom link every time. So if you set it up like a meeting that is dynamic and rotating, you got to use the automations in Zoom or the automations in your calendar program.
Yeah, the integration with Zoom, I think for any podcaster that is really decided, all right, I've been doing this long enough now. I'm going to keep doing it for the foreseeable future. I highly recommend you create a unique Zoom link for every podcast meeting. Helps keep things so much more organized with the recordings and labeled properly, and you never run the risk of somebody crashing your interview using the same Zoom link because you gave it to them and somebody who you're supposed to meet with tomorrow accidentally clicks it to join today. That's never a good thing to happen.
Yeah, I I disagree with you. So,
Really? All
and
right,
see, that's it.
let's
Kind of
have that
funny.
discussion.
But I have
Yeah.
it the opposite. And look, I
Mm.
know people who like it the way that you do. I have it the opposite. And the reason I have it the opposite is because it makes it easier for me to be sure where I'm sending them if they get confused at the last minute. And so by having a forwarding URL that's always going to the same place all the time, I have a special room set up though. So it's highly unlikely for somebody to just pop in. It's not my general meeting room where I normally have just like impromptu meetings, or you call it your personal ID in Zoom, right? I don't keep it there. It has its own space. But the reason I also do that is that make sure that I don't have to reset any Zoom settings. I don't have to check them because once I've set them there, they stay set there for that meeting room again and again. So this is why I've done that, is that I keep it at its own space. So if you've got like, you can set up multiple meeting rooms, a recurring meeting room. You can set up a webinar space if you've got a webinar license for your Zoom or for whatever, type of recording program. If you're using Restream or not Restream, any of those recording programs, what are they
Oh, you
called?
mean like Zencaster or something,
Yeah, like Zencaster. I
or
forgot the other ones.
or
They all like blur
Riverside
together.
or
Riverside.
something?
That was the RI I was thinking of. And so, like, if you've got any of those, they do set up independent. They set up independent links every single time. And people who do that, if you do not have the integration set, that means that you have to send a separate email or update the calendar links with the unique Riverside or Zencaster link to get them into that room. That's another reason I don't personally do this. I want this to be as simple as possible. And I want it to be as easy as possible for me to make sure and get corrected any problems that might have. So that's why I don't do what you say, Tom, there. But
Look,
I do understand, like, on the production side of things, the organization of those Zoom folders with the actual name from the interview and everything in it is much easier. So I do agree on that side of it. But I also make separate recordings. So it's not that much more difficult for me to do my intro, outro, my close that I do, and then rename the folder when I upload it, because I'm going to do those separately at a different time anyway.
yeah, look, I don't think this is a case of I'm right and you're wrong or vice versa.
It's just two
Honestly, I
different
think
ways.
there are different ways to do it, and I think you, as the podcaster out there listening, needs to decide which way do you prefer to do it? There's pros and cons to each, and I think we've shared a couple of them, and that's great. So, one way or the other, but certainly please record, right?
Right.
Because you got to bring your message to the world. All right, let's move on to the next.
Yeah. So the next part of setting up your calendar has all those the form questions, right? Invitee questions is what they call it in Calendly. Name, email, phone number, website bio, social links. I prefer the things that you know you're going to need on the other side. So the things that you're going to need to do a really good job of promoting them on social media, preparing a blog post, tagging them in YouTube, whatever it might be that you need, ask for it specifically. Be really specific about it. I do get a phone number because in case there's a problem, you want to pick up the phone and go like, why aren't you here? We're waiting for you. The bio is really important to me because I need it to prepare to do the interview with them. I want to make sure I'm reviewing all of that. And then I also ask for additional candid or speaking photos. And I make sure at that time that they are letting me know that they have rights to those photos. Very careful
That's
here.
very important. Actually, we need to refer people to different episode about copyright of images and things that we've talked about, because there are really good reasons why you said that, Tracy. I mean, you need to at some point trust that your guest has the rights to the images they give you, but you need to make sure that you really have asked them and that they acknowledge they have the rights to the images, because this is one that'll come back and bite you in the rear at some point, or potentially could if they really don't have the rights. But the bigger point that you're making here, Tracy, is get all of this information from your guest at the time they're booking the meeting, so you don't have to chase them down for this stuff later, right?
That's right. You don't want to be chasing them down. So the next big area is going to be all about the notifications, right? Like the follow-up notifications to say, "Oh, you booked." Right? Woohoo, you booked. Here, great. Here's the different types of follow-up emails and all the different things that you could do. So what we've given you in it is the invitation level, which could go pre-calendar, right? So it's telling people like, hey, here's how you book. So if you get somebody to agree, you send them this email, right? Or you send them this message with the link in it. It says, here, go here and book. So you do have to have that invitation level. But the follow-up emails that says, I booked as a guest, that you want to send them a 7-day warning, a 24-hour warning. You decide when you want to give them notifications. I've made some recommendations in our for what we do, but it's not set in stone. If you have an industry where people bail on you a lot, like make sure you send them more information. Like there's really no reason not to. So the first one is this, like, you've confirmed you're on the show. I'm really looking to interview you. Here's the booking calendar. Go to it. You want that same kind of thing as a response to, you booked. Great. And this is all the information on it. You could use the standard stuff that's already in Calendly. You don't need to you could customize it a little, change a sentence here and there, but you can just edit what's already there. Then it's also editing what it looks like on the calendar. So you can edit what it appears like when it drops into my calendar as a guest, the same way that you edit a notification email, right? So you can do either things. Use the calendar tools that are there because they're 90% there. Why reinvent something? The only things you want to know is something special. Like you might want to let them know they're going to be on video. Like these might be things that you want to remind them of so that they get their hair done. Whatever it is that you need to know, or remind them that they should be wearing earbuds or something like that, right? So whatever it is that's really important to you, you can add those things in here. And we've made some suggestions in our form for that for you. When you're done with that sort of personalized calendar invite, the personalized, hey, thanks for booking, you will want a prep email. And that is because a lot of you are booking far out. So if you're booking a month out, especially, and you're not just booking the same week for something, this is really important that you have a reminder email and put some prep tips in there. We recommend, talking about the video, talking about the headset, talking about, getting a good mic, talking about your location. We even mentioned that, like, any questions about how they might use Zoom, like there's any of those things we recommend to them, uh, you would put it in here. The other thing is, like, in case they haven't connected with you on social media yet, a week before your interview is a great time to do that. Right. And because if they connect up with you, you can go into it and then say, and you see them, they friended you in Facebook, you can go and thank them and say, I can't wait for our interview this week. Now you're letting your whole entire community know that's coming up. So it's a great time for you to remind them. So put all your social media links in there and kind of push them a little bit to tag you, to friend you, to follow you, whatever it is on the different platforms. And then I like to, at that point in time, also make sure that they've checked out the show. So I send them the show name. I ask them to rate and review. They don't have to, but listen and rate and review would be a good idea. You don't have to make it mandatory or anything like that. I have been guest on shows where they like, send me an email back confirming you did that. Show me a picture. Or I'm not having you on my show. I find that a little pushy and obnoxious because it's not always the right show. Just for them to be a guest doesn't make them the right person to listen to my show. So it may not always be in line for you to do that. Now, sometimes it will be. My guests usually are on the Binge Factor. They're podcasters. I'd love for them to listen. You could recommend an episode that they listen to. If you've got one that's really like basic 101 about your show, this is a great place for do it. And it reminds them to prepare for the interview with you.
Tracy, I'm always in favor of what a lot of the calendar programs do, and you can set the system to automatically email your upcoming guest a week before, or whatever time frame you feel is appropriate. And this does two things. Not only can you give them this prep information, it also asks them, you can set it to have them reconfirm that they are going to still, yes, I'm aware of the appointment, I'm going to be there. It sort of makes them a little more accountable for the appointment they booked, especially if you booked it a month or more in advance. And so I like that feature because I'd rather they told me ahead of time, uh-oh, my schedule's changed, I can't make it, and they reschedule and book, and it moves it off your calendar for that day so you don't show up. And then you're having to, although it's good that you got the phone number, Tracy, that you can call them up and say, hey, are you still joining me today? You want to be able to do that if you need it, but better to not need it and have them rebook a little further in advance, right?
Exactly. So I usually send 3 reminder notifications. I send a 7-day, which is that prep tips. And then I send a 24-hour and a 1 hour, or sometimes I'd move it to 30 minutes. It just depends, like, how I feel. Like if I think guests are sort of failing to show up on time, then I'll move it to 30 minutes. But I'm, for the most part, 1 hour notice is fine. And so I do that. Mine are different, but you can use exactly the same because repetition is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I have the prep tip one is 7 days. So it's much more lengthy. It's got all those details I told you about. And then the 24-hour and the 1 hour is just saying, hey, make sure you know where to go. Right. And don't forget to, have your microphone and headphones set up. Like I just do the little short reminder.
That's really important, I think, those reminders, because while hopefully the guest did add the appointment to their calendar, and so their own calendar will alert them and remind them and gives them all the link and everything they need, not everyone does that. So that email, like some people are just email people. Oh, let me go to an email. Let me find. I know I got a reminder, and they'll find the link there rather than look in their calendar. So you're covering your bases, right?
Yeah. One other thing that I do, because my guests are my potential clients, right? They are our potential clients. So I have a call to action that I add into those reminder emails. I add them below the signature line. So they're not like way up at the top or anything like that. I don't make them pushy. I don't put them in the middle, but I put them below my signature. So this is also another way though for you to ask them to do something for you if you want them to rate and review, or you want, if you don't have that kind of directive where you're trying to get them to become your clients. But I have just some simple call to actions that we do. So, like pay it forward. Do you know any other podcasts that can benefit from exposure on the bin factor? Refer them to be my guest. Want to thank me back for this interview? If you had a great experience on my show, the best way you can pay it forward is to subscribe, rate, and review and share the show. Like, so you could just have things like that at the bottom of it where it reminds them that you're doing them a great favor by having them on your show and that they should want to reciprocate. And even if they don't do it right then, if they've scanned through this and saw that, they'll come after they have a great experience with you. A lot of times they'll do that. And I have found like I get a thank you from someone. It's like, I had a great time on our interview. Thank you so much. And I subscribed, rated, and reviewed for you. Thank you for that. Like, so you will get feedback on this. That call to action is worth having. Just make it very compelling and in line and relevant to your guests. Not to what you necessarily need, but what something they're willing to do, likely to do, and fits it. Because if I'm never going to listen to your show, the last thing I want to do is subscribe to it. It's not in line. Just because I'm a guest on it doesn't mean I'm a subscriber of it. So make sure that you keep it relevant to what you believe that those guests will do for you and test out some. Like I rotate mine and sometimes I try different ones. And each one of those different reminders actually has a different call to action at the bottom because I test and see which one they're going to respond to.
I know some hosts that truly
Yeah.
require the guest to subscribe and review. I don't like that. I mean, like you said, it's not always a fit or appropriate, and I don't think it really is going to help you long term if they're not enforcing it. Making the request, absolutely do that, but the ones that require it, they sort of make me feel like, I don't know that I really want to be a guest on this show.
Yeah,
face to
I find
face.
it pretty icky. And
Yeah,
the other thing that I do want to say is like, look, there's the form we have is lengthy enough. There's 10 questions in there. I mean, obviously one of them is like your name, email, like they each
there's
take a
some easy
question.
ones,
Yeah,
right?
they're easy. They're not hard, but there is a like, give us your bio, give us your photos, give us this. But I've had people who are like, tell me what I should ask you and like fill out this
Uh,
major form. And it's
oh,
like 12 questions long. And I can tell you that is the number one way to never get a premium guest on your show.
there's a lot of people. I wouldn't consider myself a premium guest on a show, but I would never do that. I'm not going to do your work for you to tell you what to ask me.
It doesn't it's not a bad thing if you need an optional. It's like, why are you guesting and what can I do for you to support you the most? What is the biggest call to action you need to get out? Biggest message you want to share. You could ask that, but leave it optional. That's my recommendation. Don't make it a required field. But that way they can think that through and say, "Oh, well, I'm marketing my new book. Here's the book title." That way you have it in writing and they didn't forget to give it to you. Here's the affiliate link if you want it, right? So you could always do that, but keep it really optional. That's one of the things that like we are giving them the gift of promotion, but it doesn't mean they get to sell on it. So I want to be aware ahead of time too that that's what they're pushing.
Well, and of course, that's why we recommend every podcast edit in case they oversell on your
That's
show.
right.
That's my choice. I can cut that out. I mean, I don't mind sharing what you have to offer in the right context, but live in the podcast or the video may not be how I want to do it. I may have some information in the blog post on my website for that episode, for example, right?
Exactly. So in that lengthy prep tips that I talked about, the one that I send 7 days before the podcast interview, I have at the bottom what happens after we record, like what happens after or when it's published. And so that way I give them an idea of like how far out in my publications. You may not be able to do that if you're not consistent. Like I'm usually 6 to 8 weeks out, but maybe you're not. Maybe yours fluctuates with like one time you're 1 month away and the next you're 6 months booked out. So don't put that in there if it's not for you. If you're not consistent about that. But in that, I tell them what to expect when the the day that it goes live, you're going to get an email from my team. It's going to have this, this, and this in it. It's going to have a graphic for you. It's going to have a video short, like whatever it is that you're going to provide them, you're setting that up ahead of time. And the reason I put that in that bottom of the prep tips, and they're really long, like when you read that, that's like it's like a 2.5 pager if you looked at it on paper, right? So it's a very long email. But I take that same section and I use it again in my thank you to remind them what happens, because there'll be a lot of this email afterwards of, I used to get this, it's like, oh, when is this going to publish? Or like, and especially publicists who have sent me guests, they will send me 20 emails after the fact. And it used to drive me crazy. And so what I do is I force the publicist to be copied on all the reminder emails. So they're like an invite into the calendar so that they know it's coming. So I always make the guest and whoever books the appointment, make sure that they put both their email addresses in there. I need them anyway, because when I send all the publication information, I want to send it to the publicist, right? You don't want to just send it to your guests. So when you have that level, make sure you've got space for extra, or add a guest, add an email address. Make sure that you opt that in your form. But I use this in the thank you side of things. So immediately 1 hour after my interview with them, they get a thank you that says, thank you for being on the show. I really enjoyed my time with you. And here's some things to remember about what's going to happen when this goes to publish. So in case you forgot, and it just copies that section straight off the prep tips. It just modernizes it to say after we interviewed, right? Like, and that way it cuts down a lot on the email back and forth and a lot of the questions. So I rarely get them now because I added that to my thank you.
And that's automated, right?
Right.
That
It
thank you is not
automatically goes out.
something you have to do. It's timed to go out a certain period of time after the appointment, right?
Yes. Now, there is a glitch in some of the calendar programs, I'm going to say. If someone doesn't properly reschedule an appointment, so in other words, they didn't hit the reschedule link in the calendar booking to reschedule the time.
Uh-oh.
Yep, there's a glitch here.
Gonna happen
yeah,
here.
if you go and you just move the appointment yourself, those automation timings don't fix.
So it would send the thank you email even before you conducted the interview, potentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I do is, if I'm going to reschedule for someone because they just said, hey, I have a conflict, I got sick today, I can't speak. And it happens, right? It's happened to me all the time. I go into the calendar button and I click the reschedule for them. And I reschedule it for whatever date we agreed to. And that way all the notifications move.
That's a great tip, Tracy, that a lot of people would overlook, because you're right. I have, and not for podcast interview appointments per se, but for other business appointments, I'll just grab that appointment on the calendar and drag it to the new day and time, right? And then it moves it and updates them. Hey, if they've accepted the appointment, hey, it's moved, and it makes them accept it again. But that doesn't reset the automated email. That is
not
great
always.
tip.
It depends on the calendar program, and it also depends on the type of calendar entry you put in some of those programs. And that's why I'm, just to be safe, I've had this happen before, and they're like, hey, why are you thanking me? I was like, oh, because they don't always realize, because it sounds really friendly. They don't always realize it's an automation. And then what will happen though is when you actually do the appointment later, you won't get the thank you, because it already sent it.
That's unfortunate too.
And that's where it's more unfortunate than an accidental getting them an extra one. Now, if they cancel too soon because it's like they cancel and like the appointment was already started, you can't always reschedule it. And so in that case, I tell them, hey, ignore the 1 hour. I'm going to book you a whole new appointment. And that's what I do.
Makes a lot of sense. That's a pro tip right there, Tracy.
That's right. Great. Yeah. Believe me, I've done this enough, right?
You have.
I think I'm on my well past 3,000th interview of all times with all the podcasts and all the appointments I've had interviewing people for my articles. So I'm well past that. I haven't even kept counts in the last 6 months. So of how many more I've
Well,
done.
once you
But
get that many, I don't think it matters. It's not
yeah.
like you're wearing a badge on your shirt that says, 3,000 plus interview club or anything. It's just you've done it a lot, is the point.
I mean,
And
it means that everything that can happen did happen to me at some point, right?
definitely
Like that's
happened.
really what it is. So let's learn from that. And these things that repeat are the ones that I pay attention to, and I try to incorporate it. So we update this and this calendar or sort of planning program. We update it once a year. We update it if something massive changes in the calendar programs that we recommend. We update it if something changes in the podcast eco space, or we are now doing video and we weren't doing video before, whatever that might be. So set yourself a periodic reminder. That's the last thing I want to leave you with, is set yourself a periodic reminder to check it. So I literally have this document. It's all written out in our program, like a Google Doc, or, we have a paper doc, and it has a to-do list that's set 1 year from the time I review it. So I just automatically set that to-do reminder 1 year later. Another way to be organized and make sure you keep these things updated before somebody goes, hey, this doesn't work anymore.
Very important. I'll tell you, this episode is jam packed with value. And there's even more because you and I, Tracy, have been looking through as we're going PDF that we created, right? And
Yeah, I
that's
found a
available
couple
to.
mistakes actually, a couple things that need to be
Uh oh.
updated. Yeah,
Uh
so
oh.
we got to
All right.
update it before we load it up.
Well, we'll have a chance to do that. Those of you watching live, you'd have to wait to get this until the blog post publishes anyway, in what is it, 2 weeks or so. So, Tracy, where can everybody get that PDF?
Podcastersunited.org. And there is a whole couple of tip sections in our tip library for setting up the calendars and other areas like that. So you can go to the tip library, or when this publishes as the blog post and Feed Your Brand, it will also be there. So you'll be able to access it from both places. And whenever we update it, we will update it. So it will have the latest PDF at the time at which you download that.
Awesome. That's a valuable resource right there. So everyone, check that out. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap for this episode, don't you think, Tracy?
Yeah, I get jazzed by someone who's such a pro at podcasting. I look forward to being on their show. When you set this up, you'll be surprised at how much excitement and energy your guests have when they arrive. They feel like everything went right up to that point. You're going to deliver a great interview. And if you were asking them to work with you in some capacity, whether it's just as referring another guest, they are going to be more eager to do that. So setting up this professional tone now is going to save you and make everything you do and every guest appointment you have more effective.
Fantastic. Awesome. Let's leave it there. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on Feed Your Brand.
Okay, live
That was
streaming.
great. That was great.
Take
Okay,
care, everyone
live
out in the
stream
live
audience,
stream
take
world. We'll
care.
see you later. We're going to go to Zoom and answer some questions from